Good afternoon. A couple of announcements. The President will be traveling to Kansas City, Missouri next Tuesday, July 24th. He will address the Veterans of Foreign Wars 119th Annual Convention. President Trump is committed to our veterans and has worked to reform the VA and to ensure veterans are given the care and support they deserve. The President looks forward to being with the more than 4,000 veterans in attendance. Yesterday, the U.S. Senate confirmed Randy Quarles as the Vice Chair for Supervision at the Federal Reserve, but it is unfortunate that his nomination was continually delayed. There are still 3 more nominees to the Fed who have yet to receive a vote. It is inexcusable that Senate Democrats have delayed confirming the President's nominees. An even worse example of unnecessary delay is the nomination of Don Stump to be a commissioner on the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. There is no opposition to her, but yet she has been waiting for 400 days for a vote. We urge Senate Democrats to stop these unnecessary delays and confirm these qualified nominees. Lastly, on behalf of the President and the White House, we offer prayers for United States Secret Service Special Agent Noel Edward Remagen and his family, including his wife and 2 young children. The Secret Service announced this morning that Agent Remagen suffered a stroke while on duty in Scotland last week and has tragically passed away. He was a 5-year veteran of the United States Marines and spent 19 years with the Secret Service. The President and the First Lady are deeply grateful for his lifetime of devotion to his country. And the men and women of the Secret Service make enormous sacrifices for our safety and security, and we are forever in their debt. And with that, I will take your questions. Major.
Earlier, Cecilia asked the President, is Russia still targeting the U.S.? He said no. Is that what the President actually believes? Did he understand the question? And is his position that no, Russia is not doing anything to interfere or meddle in the 2018 election?
I had a chance to speak with the President after those comments, and the President said thank you very much and was saying no to answering questions. The President and his administration are working very hard to make sure that Russia is unable to meddle in our elections, as they have done in the past and as we have stated.
So he does believe it's going on?
Well, since there's currently not an election today, not specifically, but we certainly believe that we are taking steps to make sure they can't do it again. Unlike previous administrations, this president is actually taking bold action and reform to make sure it doesn't happen again. But he does believe that they would target certainly U.S. elections again.
Between the President and the DNI codes who said the red lights are blinking on this topic?
No, as I just said, that's why we're taking steps to ensure that these things don't happen again. We wouldn't actually spend as much time and effort as we are if we didn't believe that they were still looking at us. From the beginning of his administration, President Trump has actually taken action to defend our election system from meddling and interference. I'm going to read through a few of the things that we're doing. In May of 2017, President Trump signed an executive order to strengthen and review the cybersecurity of our nation and its critical infrastructure. The Department of Homeland Security has taken the lead in working with all 50 states, local governments, and private companies to improve election security. DHS has increased coordination among all election partners. 34 states, 52 county and local governments, and 5 election companies receive cybersecurity scans regularly from DHS. DHS plans to provide on-site risk and vulnerability assessments to all states that request it. So far, 18 states have requested this assessment. A new pilot program was launched to increase rapid response capabilities on Election Day, and in 2017, on-site cybersecurity support was provided. In March of 2018, Congress provided the Election Assistance Commission with $380 million in funding for election assistance grants to states. These are steps that we've taken to prevent it from happening. These are steps that we've taken because we see that there's a threat there. Cecilia.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to clarify what you just said. Dan Coats said point blank the threat is still ongoing from Russia. Does this White House believe that currently this threat is still ongoing?
Certainly, like I just said, we believe that the threat still exists, which is why we are taking steps to prevent it. Again, you wouldn't go through that lengthy process if you weren't.
The President yesterday clarified his comments from his press conference Monday with Vladimir Putin. Does the President stand by all of his other public comments on the trip, including his comments in an interview criticizing Theresa May's handling of the Brexit negotiations, his comments that Russia controlled Germany over that pipeline? and other comments in that press conference Monday where he continued to cast doubt on the intelligence committee's assessment of Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Does he stand by all of those?
Again, the president saw a need to clarify the position. He saw how his comments were being interpreted. He looked at the transcript and clarified those comments.
And sir, does the White House have any response to the arrest and indictment of a Russian national who's accused of trying to infiltrate American political organizations, particularly on the right, to try to influence American politics?
Certainly, we're looking at that, but just to clarify, I know that there was massive media hysteria yesterday over confusion between that individual and a White House staffer, which I think shows, frankly, the outrageousness and the just desire to find the negative in everything that this president does. Just because somebody was simply redheaded, they were accused of being some sort of spy for Russia. I think that this has gotten totally out of control. You guys need to take a little bit of a step back, slow down, and quit going after the Trump administration on every single thing that takes place.
You have no response to the indictment, but you have a response to the media?
I said we're looking at it, but this is a lengthy process. We're going through it. However, I do have a response to the fact that simply because somebody had the same hair color, they were accused of being a Russian spy by a large number of people, frankly, in this room. Roberta.
The President today and the Secretary of State both spoke about progress being made in trade talks with Mexico. And I'm wondering whether trilateral talks with Mexico and Canada and also the bilateral talks with Canada are effectively off the table for now. Is the administration choosing to go with Mexico where they see there's progress and forget about the trilateral approach?
We're continuing both of those tracks. We see a lot of progress on the conversations with Mexico, and if we could make a bilateral deal with them, we're certainly very happy to do that. But again, we're continuing both conversations, both tracks. Maggie?
Thank you, Sarah. Russian authorities yesterday named several Americans who they want to question, who they claim were involved in Bill Browder's quote-unquote crimes in their terms, including a former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Does President Trump support that idea? Is he open to having U.S. officials questioned by Russia?
The president's going to meet with his team, and we'll let you know when we have an announcement on that.
For a second, is that a topic that came up in their conversation? Did President Putin raise this with President Trump?
There was some conversation about it, but there wasn't a commitment made on behalf of the United States, and the president will work with his team, and we'll let you know if there's an announcement on that front. Blake?
Thank you, Sarah. The president earlier today said that there could be, quote, tremendous retribution for the European Union if there's not a deal struck on auto imports. In the past, he has talked about potentially putting a tariff of 20%. Is that what he meant today by tremendous retribution, or is it possible he goes even beyond that?
Certainly that's an option on the table that the president is considering, but we are in the investigation process right now, and we'll let you know when we have an announcement. Yemi?
You brought up the Fed. The Beige Book just came out, which is anecdotes from across the country of what's happening with the economy. Here's some of the headlines. Manufacturers are concerned about tariffs. They're dealing with higher prices because of trade. Tariffs are increasing metal prices, and ag prices have fallen because of Chinese tariffs. It's not necessarily a rosy picture with the tariff situation. Your response to those headlines would be what?
The president is focused on long-term economic principles. We have one of the strongest economies that we've had in decades. He continues to look for ways to help protect American workers, and he's going to continue to do that on a number of different fronts in a number of different ways. Again, this is short-term, and the president hopes to open up a number of different markets and to create a more playing trade field across the globe. Yumi?
Hi, Sarah. Two questions. The first one, in Finland, President Trump, when talking about the stances of the U.S. intelligence community and of Russia, he said, quote, that I have confidence in both parties. After a young woman was killed in Charlottesville, Virginia, after protesting neo-Nazis, he said, I think there's blame on both sides. Some people see this as a president continuously making false equivalences. What do you say to that criticism?
I would not compare the two situations. The president, I think, said exactly what he thought yesterday in his remarks, and I would refer you back to those. Josh? Sorry, go ahead.
And also, does the president see the interference in the 2016 election and possibly in the midterms as an attack on democracy, American democracy? The Secretary for Homeland Security said that it was an attack on American democracy, but the president said that the Democrats are weak, that Republicans basically had better systems. Does he see it as an issue of American democracy or just his opponents being attacked?
Again, the president thinks that we have to focus on securing our election integrity and our election systems, which is why he has spent so much time with his administration making sure that this doesn't happen again. Let's not forget that this didn't happen under President Trump's watch. This happened under the Obama administration. We're taking steps. We're making bold reforms to try to fix this and make sure it never happens again because we take it seriously and because we recognize that our election system are incredibly important and is certainly a cornerstone of our democracy. Josh.
The president spent
Find
2 hours. The president spent 2 hours and 10 minutes with Vladimir Putin. Was there a deal made on Syria? Was there a deal made on anything? Can you give us any sense of what came out of that meeting?
Certainly, as the president said, a number of issues were raised, including Syrian humanitarian aid, Iran's nuclear ambition, Israeli security, North Korean denuclearization, Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea, reducing Russian and U.S. nuclear arsenals, and of course, your favorite topic, Russia's interference in our elections. All of these issues were talked about. This is the beginning of the dialogue with Russia and our administration and theirs, and we're going to continue working through those things. But those were all of the topics, and certainly probably others that were covered.
Follow up on a number of issues from the annexing of Crimea to election meddling. The president seems to have spent more time criticizing his predecessor, Barack Obama, for letting it happen in his telling than Vladimir Putin. Do you have any sense why the president has not been more critical of Putin for some of these events that the entire world stage has really gone after him about?
Look, I think the president, as he has said many times before, has been tougher on Russia than anybody. I think you can see that in all of the actions that he's taken, whether it was a plant that was closed due to aluminum and steel tariffs that were put in place by this president. The Treasury Department has issued new sanctions on numerous individuals and entities in Russia. The president has continued sanctions on Russia's malicious cyber activity in response to election hacking. We've expelled 60 Russian operatives from the United States and closed 2 consulates. President Trump issued 4 statements condemning Russia's poisoning of UK citizens on UK soil, authorized the sale of lethal aid to Ukraine, authorized military strikes against the Assad regime in Syria, and has repeatedly called out Russia's actions, exporting energy to our allies in Eastern Europe. Look, the president has been extremely tough on Russia, and to say anything different is just not true.
Why is he critical of other world leaders by name far more often than Vladimir Putin? Why won't he criticize Putin by name?
I think he has. I think he has called them out for interfering our election. He's been tough on Russia repeatedly, and he's taken action against Russia on a number of fronts that I just listed off.
Like Monday,
When
he was beside him on Monday, though, why wasn't he critical of Vladimir Putin's actions?
Look, they had a number of conversations. The president discussed some of these things directly, face-to-face with Vladimir Putin. He addressed him again yesterday. The president also sees this as an opportunity, as he said many times, to be able to work with Russia. He recognizes the fact that 90% of the world's nuclear weapons are under the direction of the United States and Russia. He thinks it's a good thing to get along with the other person that controls that much of the nuclear arsenal across the globe. He wants to create a more stable world, a more peaceful world, and we can't do that if we can't get along with Russia in some capacity. And so certainly we've called him out. We've been tough. We've approached this in a totally different fashion than has been previously done, because what's been done in the past hasn't worked. So we're trying a new approach, but to act like he hasn't been tough on Russia, that he hasn't called them out, is simply not true, and it simply completely changes everything that this administration has done in regards to that country. Josh, I'm going to keep going. Justin?
Sarah, a minute ago you described the negative impacts of the trade conflict with China as short term, but that's only true if we're able to strike a better deal. And from the outside, since the tariffs went on 2 weeks ago, it seems like those negotiations have broken down. So I'm wondering if you could tell us what the status of them are, why the Treasury Secretary isn't meeting one-on-one with China when he's in Argentina for the G20, and what it would take from the Chinese or from the U.S. to restart those talks.
Look, I'm not going to negotiate with you guys. I'm going to leave that to Secretary Mnuchin and Ambassador Lighthizer. We're continuing to have conversations with China. We're continuing to look for ways that we can have a better trade deal with them. Steve?
I want to follow up on Maggie's question, because she asked about the idea that Putin offered of essentially allowing Robert Mueller and his investigators to go to Russia to oversee or witness the interrogations of the Russian military intelligence officers if the U.S. would reciprocate and have Russian investigators come here to watch American citizens face questions about the crimes that they allegedly committed in Russia. The president called it an interesting idea. He said it was an incredible offer. Why would he say that?
He said it was an interesting idea. He didn't commit to anything. He wants to work with his team and determine if there's any validity that would be helpful to the process. But again, we've committed to nothing, and it was an idea that they threw out.
Sarah, some Democrats on Capitol Hill now are saying that they want to drag the translator who was in the room with the president and Vladimir Putin before congressional committees to find out exactly what was said in their private meeting. Is that something that the White House would ever support?
That's something that would go through the State Department. Mike?
The list of subjects you went through as far as for the one-on-one meeting, unless I missed it, were sanctions discussed at all? Did the president bring it up, or did President Putin bring it up to President Trump?
I'm not aware. I'd have to ask to be sure. Hallie?
Just one quick one. Yesterday, the president's revision, it was kind of seen widely that he was leaving himself a little bit of room when he said there could have been others too who've meddled. Was he referring to any specific intelligence on that, or was that his instinct then?
Certainly the president receives a number of briefings and has talked about this subject pretty extensively. We're aware of others that have made attempts, but I can't get into any of that here at this point. Hallie?
Two questions for you, and I want to just clarify something you talked about at the beginning of the briefing. So despite the video that shows the president looking at Cecilia and answering no to this question about whether Russia is still targeting the U.S., and despite multiple people in the room understanding that the president was responding to that question, and despite the president having never before said the word no repeatedly to usher reporters out of the room, you're saying it's a reverse. You're saying the president said this is
The first thing that the
time-
president said after the question was asked was, "Thank you very much," and then he said, "No, I'm not answering any more questions." And even further, I think even Cecilia didn't realize what the answer was because she asked for clarification and he didn't answer the follow-up. Again, right, because she wasn't sure. I talked to the president. He wasn't answering that question. He was saying no, he's not taking questions, and I've stated what our position is.
Let me get to my question, Sarah, because I haven't actually asked it yet, which is the president, now this is the second time in 3 days that the president of the White House has come out and reversed what the president has said. To the
Actually,
opposite of what it was
I'm
perceived,
interpreting
Sarah.
what the president said.
But
I'm not
was
reversing
perceived
it.
the opposite way. Why
I was
should
in
this
the room as
president-
well, and I didn't take it the way you did.
But why should this president have any credibility to Americans in what he says if, in fact, 24 hours later, or in this case, 3 hours later, the White House comes out and says, just kidding?
First of all, that's not what I said. I was interpreting what the president's intention was and stating the administration's policy. It's not exactly what you just explained. We never said just kidding. And I think that you can take the fact that the president has credibility because he saw that he had misspoken, and he wanted to clarify that yesterday, which he did. So when he sees that he's misspoken, he comes out and he says that. Jordan.
Follow up on
Sorry, I'm
Josh.
gonna
The
keep
second
moving.
question.
Sure.
You
Jordan,
told
go ahead.
Josh, well, just to follow up on my second question, Sarah.
Sorry,
you told
you've asked
I did
two.
have,
I'm
I
gonna
had
move on
two.
to Jordan.
You told Josh the president has been
Once again,
publicly
Hallie, I'm
critical
moving
of
on to
Vladimir.
Jordan. Jordan, go ahead.
You said,
Sorry, Hallie, go ahead if you want.
thanks, Jordan. You said to
Actually,
Josh,
I'm gonna
the
take a
president has
question
been
from
publicly
Jordan.
critical of Vladimir Putin. I just want to know when, because I don't think any of us remember, at least I don't remember a time when the president has publicly called up Vladimir Putin.
I think by stating the fact that the president said that Russia interfered with our election, that's a pretty bold call out of another world leader. Jordan, go ahead.
Senators Rubio and Van Hollen have introduced legislation that would impose new sanctions on Russia if the intelligence agencies find that they meddle in the 2018 midterms or in the future. Would the President Trump support a proposal like that?
I'm not going to get into a hypothetical situation until we see a final piece of legislation and also a determination if there's election meddling. Again, our goal is to stop that from happening, which is why we've spent such a significant amount of time in the first year and a half of our administration focusing on protecting the election integrity system. John,
With that, Sarah, is voter suppression?
John, go ahead.
Sarah, is voter suppression
Sorry.
included with that,
Guys,
please?
if we could go on the
I'm just
people that
asking you a
I've
question
called
because
on.
you choose not to call on me. Is voter suppression part of that election process that the president is trying to look for?
John, go ahead.
Oh, you're not going to answer that?
I
Voter
call on
suppression
you, I'll
is a
be happy
huge
to
issue
answer
that a
your
community in
question.
America
John, go
has
ahead.
asked about. You're not going to answer me.
John, go ahead.
That's all right, fine.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to ask you about the immediate reaction to the president's comments that he made at that joint press conference in Helsinki, it was immediate. Every cable channel, Fox, NBC, CNN, reacted immediately to the suggestion the president made that he did not believe that Russia interfered in the U.S. presidential election. I got my inbox inundated with emails from Republican members of Congress with their reaction immediately. And 24 hours, it took 24 hours for the president to correct the record. Why did it take so long for the president to clarify the comments that he made at that press conference?
Look, the president put out an initial tweet after boarding Air Force One that clarified his comments on the intelligence community, wanted to make sure that was clear, and at the very first chance he had in a public setting the following day, he clarified his comments. And I don't think that it was that long for that to be the very first public appearance that he had following arriving back to the United States.
So actually, it's a pretty long time, and it was out there for quite a bit.
It wasn't actually 24 hours before he responded at all. Again, he put out an initial tweet from Air Force One.
Comment on this to clarify his remarks, to change the wood to wooden, or the wooden to wood. And I think that, you know, a lot of people would argue that there was ample time for the president. He tweets all the time from Air Force One.
And he tweeted that night.
To put out a statement which clarified what he meant to say during the joint news conference, and he didn't do that. Why? What took so long is my question.
Once he reviewed the transcript, he wanted to publicly address the clarification, in which he did.
Constantly, Sarah. There are currently efforts within Congress to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Is that something that the White House would support for lack of cooperation in turning over documents to Congress?
The president's made clear he'd like all documents to be turned over, but we're continuing to work with our Department of Justice. I don't have anything further on that. Jim, go ahead.
To follow up on that, would the White House denounce that effort then? Do they have confidence within the Deputy Attorney General?
The president would like to see the documents turned over. When the president no longer has confidence in someone, his administration will let you know. Jim.
Sure. On Friday at the press conference with Prime Minister May, I asked the president as he was leaving whether or not he would tell Vladimir Putin to stay out of U.S. elections. As he was leaving with Prime Minister, he said yes. Did the president tell Vladimir Putin at their summit in Helsinki to stay out of U.S. elections?
Certainly the president, as both he and President Putin said, discussed election meddling. I think we've made very clear what our position is on that front.
You're saying that they discussed election meddling, but did the president of the United States tell the president of Russia to stay out of U.S. elections?
The president has made clear to Vladimir Putin that he should stay out of U.S. elections. Sorry, I'm going to keep moving. April, go ahead.
Was there a recording
Sorry, Jim,
made?
I'm going to take a couple last questions.
Was there a recording made of their one-on-one meeting? Does that exist?
I'm not aware of one.
So Sarah, since you keep saying that the president is very concerned about the election process, you talk about what he's doing. You did not mention voter suppression in that. Voter suppression has been an issue for decades. And particularly in these last few elections, is voter suppression now on the table? When he was talking about voter fraud, people were talking about voter suppression as well. Is voter suppression on the table as well?
We want to do everything within our power to protect the integrity of our elections, and we're going to look at that on a number of fronts. The reason I address these specific issues is because of Russia's involvement in our elections in the past. I'm going to take one last question. Right here, Jim.
Sarah, I want to change topic a minute, if I may. And go south.
Sure, I think that'd be fine.
Thank you. So the incoming president of Mexico has made two very bold suggestions. Number one, he's looking at giving amnesty to the drug cartels operating within there. Today they come out and say they're seriously looking at legalizing all drugs in Mexico. Now if they do that, obviously it's going to have a tremendous impact on the incoming amount of drugs into the United States. What is the president's position on that, and are they going to do anything to stop that from happening in Mexico?
Certainly, we're going to continue engaging with our Mexican partners. I don't have a specific policy announcement on that front. However, I can say that we would not support the legalization of all drugs anywhere, and certainly wouldn't want to do anything that would allow more drugs to come into this country. Thanks so much. Have a great day.